Do we have a deal, Mr. Reagan?
You know, I know this steak doesn't exist. I know that when I put it in my mouth, the Matrix is telling my brain that it is juicy and delicious. After 9 years, you know what I realize? Ignorance is bliss.
Then we have a deal.
I don't want to remember nothing. Nothing. You understand? I don't want to be rich. You know, someone important. Like an actor.
Whatever you want, Mr. Reagan.
Okay, that was a scene from The Matrix. And in that scene, the character Cypher is meeting with one of the bad guys, and he's making a deal that in exchange for turning in Orpheus and betraying him, he's going to be given a cushy life in the Matrix, a world that is just a simulation. So he's going to be his brain will be uploaded into the Matrix, and he's going to have everything, and like the steak and the wine for the rest of his life, or forever maybe. For as long as the Matrix exists, he will have nothing but pleasure. And then he realizes that that's what he cares about most, is pleasurable sensations. And the scene is interesting because it has some philosophical suggestions in it that are helpful to talk about. So one of the things that this scene is useful for talking about is the topic of matter, material world, or the real outer world versus the internal subjective one that you experience. And, I need to talk for a second about what we mean by matter in philosophy today, because people are not usually that clear on it. Now, nobody actually ever studied or observed matter, as much as it sounds like it when you read scientific texts. They understand that they're not dealing with matter. They only perceive their own internal subjective states like everybody else, whether they're scientists or not scientists. We're all kind of locked into experience of sensible qualities. But matter is a theoretical other thing. It is not a sensible phenomena. It's not something that we perceive. Matter is theoretical. It's a substance that is assumed to exist. So best way to explain it is if you took an object like my fire engine I keep mentioning, and you remove the color and the temperature and the scent and the sound of the engine and everything about it, all the sensible qualities, what would you have left? In other words, if you removed all the qualities that you can experience through your five senses, what would be left of the fire engine? Well, it's not clear that anything would be left of the fire engine. But if there were, it's always been called either the substance or the matter. But obviously we can't perceive it because it's not a sensible quality itself. It's what is theorized to be there. And it used to be called, in the Enlightenment, it was called the substratum, that there are all these sensible qualities we experience, but somehow there's some kind of substratum holding them up But that doesn't make any sense. How could something be holding up our own sensations? So it's always been kind of a confused idea. And a very famous philosopher, John Locke, in the Enlightenment said, we know as much about this substance stuff as we do about spirit, which is basically nothing at all since we can't perceive it. So so this scene, I'm going to replay it now, and I want to show that I'm going to break it into two parts, one and then another over itself, and one we're going to call real and the other we're going to call not real. And let's assume that one of them is in the real world and one of them is in the artificial matrix world. So let's watch that, where I have that divided that way. And I'm going to make a point about this, like, what is the difference between experiencing our sensible qualities in the first and experiencing them in the second, and what would be the basis of calling one real and the other not real? Because let's watch that.
Do we have a deal, Mr. Regan?
You know, I know this steak doesn't exist. I know that when I put it in my mouth, the matrix is telling my brain that it is juicy and delicious. After 9 years, you know what I realize? Ignorance is bliss.
Okay, so the point of my showing that again, with the words on it, is that to call one real and not real is kind of arbitrary. Both are perceived, and what we mean by something that's physical is that it has certain characteristics, has certain qualities that you can examine, and they include mass, shape, weight, volume, solidity, immutability, and they are publicly experienced. More than one perceives a physical object. It's not just a hallucination or a dream or imagination. So you pick up something, and if it has this weightiness, and it has shape, and it has mass, and it has volume, and it has solidity, and things don't pass through it, we call that material or physical. And we call it that based on the qualities. So the steak that the character Cypher is eating in the scene has all the qualities of a material piece of steak. So to call that not real, well, what would we mean? In the context of the plot of the film, there is a sense in which one is more real than the other. One is the natural world that evolved by itself, and the other is a a simulacrum. It is a copy of it, or an imitation of it. It's an artificial copy, and that's created by the Matrix. So it's a simulation of the actual natural world. But is there any qualitative difference? No. You would never be able to find any difference. And my point is that when I talked in my last talk, and I said that the evolution of perception is a progression, an evolution from an earlier primal state, which is immaterial. Okay, it's perception, and then you have the lenses that evolved, the lens of space and the lens of time and the lens of the natural laws, and then out of them supervene our bodies, and they develop the sense organs and the nerves that attribute to mathematical states their qualitative states, like taste and color and sound and touch and so forth. And so you wind up at the end in what I called a material world. That matter is at the end of the process, and we can't imagine it back at the beginning. Now, somebody contacted me and he said, well, I have a problem with that, because how could you know that? How could you know that there's no matter at the beginning of the process? Now, I hope I made this clear. What's evolving over the course of the evolution of perception are the qualities that we attribute to matter. So that they're the qualities that we mean when we say something's material. So they're the qualities of mass, shape, weight, volume. All of these evolve. So when I say that matter has evolved, I don't really mean a metaphysical, unperceived substance. I just mean all the qualities are there that is what we mean by our word matter or material or physical. So it's, for all intents and purposes, the world that we live in is material. Because in the theory, there is no other sense. And that's where I went off and said, therefore, the perceived cup, which has these qualities, is the real cup. It's not it's not a simulacrum of something else. It's the real deal, because that's all that ever happened was perception. And perception reaches this state, and you are in the actual physical world, even though it has no theoretical substance. But a lot of people don't believe in that anyway. It's just that's why there was a portion of this series called Matter is a Theoretical Entity, because it's known in philosophy that it's a theoretical entity, because you can't perceive it. It's a way to explain what it is that we are perceiving. But it's not necessarily the only way to explain it. The evolution of perception can account for all the same qualities. Okay. But this person, he emailed in. No, he didn't email. He commented on one of the videos. And actually, I think it was this one, this last one. And I was very appreciative, and I am always appreciative when people comment. And I wanted to quote from him, and I hope that's okay. I'm not going to say his name, just keep his anonymity. But he says he's a retired truck driver, and he's been enjoying these videos. But they make him think, and he challenged me on a couple of things, and I do appreciate that. That's why I'm here. He wrote, but the immateriality to matter timeline, which was in my last video, which I just sort of tried to recapitulate, didn't click with me. We were born into it, meaning matter. We were born into the material, which is consistent with everything I just said. But I'm just redefining what we mean by material. I mean the sensible qualities that we mean by matter, and not some theoretical stuff. But we are born into this world with mass and shape and governed by natural laws and all this. But that would be explained also by the evolution of perception. But anyway, he says, we're born into it. You can't disprove the idea that there was ever a time that matter didn't exist. It's unfalsifiable, impossible to verify. Therefore, it can't add credibility to an idea. At this stage of the game, it cannot be known. But thanks for jump-starting my brain. He's a retired truck driver. Jump-start my brain is a great metaphor for a truck driver. Evolution of perception. That'll give the old brain cells something to chew on for a while. I really appreciated this. Thank you very much, Mr. Truck Driver. That is just wonderful. But I want to respond to it. So, it's true that we can't... We're talking about how things were in the beginning of creation. Whether you're a theist or not, there had to have been some kind of beginning. And there had to have been some formation. So how can we know how things were in the beginning? Well, I've already first said that we didn't have things like substance, mass, weight, volume, gravitational pull, and so forth in the very beginning. And how can I say that? Obviously, I can't time travel and observe the beginning to see and measure things or look. So I have to use some other method. But there are two ways. Well, there's really no way to know what happened in the past. So the point in the comment is good as far as it goes. We can never falsify a claim about what happened in the past because we can't go there. But there's another way, which is through reasoning, which is something I've already talked about, which is that whenever you have something in the present, there are necessary conditions for that to exist. And I say, a thing cannot exist before the conditions necessary for its existence exist. Anybody can see that that's necessarily true a priori. If something is necessary for it to exist, it had to have come before it, because that laid the conditions for its existence. So let's say we want to talk about how this pen came into existence. Well, there were engineers who drew the pen, and they had to learn a lot about ink and all the things that go into the physical laws that go into a pen, so that the certain amount of ink could keep coming for a certain amount of time. And engineers have studied nature enough to know how to produce a pen that really works. But obviously, for an engineer to be working on the physics of the natural laws had to have existed first, and also all the materials that that it governs, they have to exist before he can put together a pen. So let's go back to the world, the material world, the world with density and with mass and weight and everything, before there were any people to make pens. Well, supposedly, I'll put on some videos. There were some, evolutionary processes in the universe where planets formed, and those materials were part of those planets. The various, stone and metal and tar and all the things that we put together to make things like pens. They came together and settled into planets. But you can't have a planet do that until you first have a necessary condition for those planets forming are the natural laws. You can't have the planet and then have the natural laws. You have to have the natural laws first, because the planets form in obeyance to the natural laws. It's actually gravity that pulls a planet together. If there weren't gravity, a planet couldn't form. So gravity is a necessary condition of it. And for there to be gravity, because gravity is a law that governs a mass, materials with mass, which is a ratio of time and space, there had to have been, of course, time and space. So time and space had to come before gravity. And gravity had to come before what we call matter, because gravity is what pulls it together and gives it its solidity and form. Those things that we ascribe to matter, like mass, shape, weight, volume, solidity, immutability. And so, in the beginning you have space and time. But in order for the evolution to create space, you of course first had to have time, because there had to be the time for the second one to form. Now, I don't mean space formed, I meant the lens, which I've already gone over. I'm not going to go over it again. These lenses, therefore, have a necessary order, which I've already explained. And so when we go all the way back to perception itself, that is imagining up first time, then space, then the number, then natural laws, then the things that are governed by natural laws that form out of the natural laws, like planets. And then finally you have, on those planets, evolves people, and there's more evolution then. They develop the intellect and language, and then they become engineers, and then they study the laws, and then they can make pens. Well, at the beginning, there was no material stuff. There was just the space and time. And then even before that, there was just perception. So that's what I meant by that, is that it's more true to say that the qualities we ascribe to matter or substance, to the physical, did not obtain before the conditions necessary for them. And if you go back through and you can go back logically to what is required for that, you very quickly leave the dimension of physicality. So physicality, like I said, arrives at the end of the process and not at the beginning of the process. So I just wanted to go over that. Another thing, made a mistake in my previous one. I couldn't remember the Doppler effect, but that's what I was describing by sound waves compressing and light waves compressing by something and being pulled apart subjectively from the point of view of an observer for sound, for stars and race cars. And I was using that to show that it was just on the point from that video, which was that appearances are not the same as reality. We don't determine reality from appearances. They're separate. And so the Doppler effect is a good example where following appearances, we would come to the wrong judgments. We have to look more deeply and philosophically at things than just mere appearances, because things appear wrong. Just like the world, the Earth appears from certain vantage points, it appears to be flat. We have to do a lot more investigating before we realize, no, really it has to be round, which explains better the movements of the planet, the celestial bodies that we see in the day and the night, the sun and so forth. So that was an argument against direct realism. Direct realism is like appearances are what is. And I didn't really need to go over that, but it kind of bothered me that I couldn't remember the word Doppler effect. Even when I was editing it, and I could have dropped in the word Doppler effect, but it just didn't come to my mind. So I just put it on like it was. Thank you very much. I see you next time. Bye-bye.
Okay. You get my body back in the power plant. Reinsert me into the Matrix. I'll get you what you want.
Access codes to the Zion mainframe.
No, I told you I don't know them. I can get you the man who does.
Morpheus.